and thank you for joining us for another episode of Hope for Healthcare with Dr. Katie Cole in partnership with ICD Healthcare Network. Dr. Katie Cole is a holistic physician, organizational well-being consultant, and change agent, working with industry leaders and proven strategies to heal our national healthcare system and our culture of medicine. Stay tuned to hear today's speaker.
All right, well, welcome everyone to Hope for Healthcare. This is a podcast in which we interview expert leaders around the country on best practices for healing our national healthcare system and culture of medicine. Today, I want to extend a warm welcome to Ryan Wolf. Ryan is a well-being consultant for Gallup clients and associates. He leads Gallup's health and well-being strategies through partnerships with its research team, business channels, benefits department, consulting practice, and external medical and wellness partners. His solutions and initiatives serve Gallup clients, associates, and family members. He is also an author, speaker, presenting research and tactical advice to enhance well-being within organizations and the public. He is also currently pursuing his education doctorate in education and leadership. Well, welcome, Ryan, and thank you so much for being here today. We're really excited. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Well, likewise, Katie, thanks a lot for inviting me, and super fun to be here for first part of the year. So definitely energized by this conversation.
Absolutely. Oh, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Right.
Hope it's off to a good start. Well, Brian, can you tell our audience a little bit more about your background and how you became interested in employee and organizational well-being?
You bet. So I'm just a kid from Lincoln, Nebraska, which is the college town in the state of Nebraska. So grew up there. I currently live in Omaha, which is where our operations headquarters is for Gallup, and that's where we have about 600 or 700 full-time employees who I get to partner with each and every day. So love living in Nebraska, right in the middle of the state. And Katie, I know you're from Iowa, so we've got that Midwest bond that we can share here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, so I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Nebraska, and right out of the gates started working at Gallup. And I actually started working as a part-time employee for Gallup in Lincoln when I was 16 years old. I was what they called a consumer interviewer. So part-time, I would go into our call center and I'd dial all around the United States, and I'd ask respondents questions about things like political polling, like who are you going to vote for. That used to be a big part of our polling practice, kind of predicting who is going to win the U.S. presidency. But we'd ask a lot of other questions too, customer satisfaction questions, things like that. So I, from an early age, got a taste of kind of what the Gallup culture and strengths culture and having a really good manager was all about. So when the opportunity presented itself right out of undergrad, I started working at Gallup in our fitness center as a health and wellness coach for Gallup employees. So it's a great career for someone who's youngster. I had an exercise science undergrad degree, so that was kind of my background, was kind of just that whole realm of how do we kind of improve our physical selves in a way that can enhance everything else that is important in our lives, our relationships, and our work, and kind of our sense of community and purpose. So that was my start, and I think my love and my love and curiosity, we'll say, for organizational well-being has just, I don't think there was an aha moment, but a really slow blossoming of just realizing how important well-being can be and is for an organization and for all of its constituents and stakeholders. And I've just kind of slowly learned how significant well-being is for managers to really lead and to support and I've just got a lot of thoughts on that, I guess. But I don't want this to turn into a TED Talk, so I think I've answered I think I've answered the first question in a really roundabout and
Yeah.
methodical way. But yeah, that's kind of a little background on who I am.
Okay. Well, and it's interesting that you said it was sort of a slower kind of organic process for you to become interested in well-being in the workplace. And I think that happens for a lot of us. I know that happened for me too. And I happened to stumble upon, organizational well-being in healthcare and several years ago and was just excited that this was actually happening and slowly kind of getting into the field. So I appreciate that. And I know that you're a really deep thinker and have a lot of insight today. So the next question I have for you is, why it's really important to understand your strengths in order to have an intentional and successful life and career. Like why are we even talking about this today?
Yeah, strengths. So, okay, so if nobody or if you're not really fully aware of Gallup Clifton Strengths Finder, I can just give a quick background,
Yeah.
so then I can help explain why it's important. So Clifton Strengths was created by Don Clifton, and he was a founder of our organization, Gallup. He started SRI Selection Research Incorporated in Lincoln in the 1980s. He was a professor at the University of Nebraska, and then we acquired a Gallup in the late 1980s. So he was super interested in not what was wrong with people, but what was right with people, and that was kind of against the grain for academics in kind of the mid to late 20th century, um, i- in that kind of in that sphere of
Mhm.
studying psychology and kind of identifying solutions and initiatives, we'll say. So his big deal, what he was super interested in was what makes people right. So he underwent a really big project to answer that question, and he identified really successful people inside really successful organizations and asked them hundreds of questions about um, what um, what kind of and it really to try to identify what differentiated them between those who weren't successful. And the manifestation of that big process of asking all those questions was the Clifton Strengths. There's 34 themes of strengths, and there are four kind of domains of strengths, and there's strategic thinking, there's influencing themes, there's relationship building themes, and there's executing themes. And all of us, I guess, really, if you think about strengths, we can kind of start with natural tendencies, and really, when you think about that, it's kind of talent. So talent is really we like to say talent is very evenly distributed. Everyone has talent. We're all born with something that is really unique about us that we're really good at. And but that's just kind of the starting point for strengths. In order to really in order to make that talent a strength, we need to add some knowledge and skill and repetition to it. And
Okay.
so 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 I think that the Clifton Strengths Finder kind of helps identify what naturally we can be good at, and then once we have kind of your top 10 or your top 5 themes from the assessment, then we can identify how we can apply it to the work that we do each and every day. And I'm just trying to get back to your original question, why is it so important? I think, with strengths, we think about ease, excellence, and enjoyment, what you do really well, what you do with excellence, what you do that comes easy to you. And that's really what I think about and what we tend to think about when we think about what our strengths are, and not trying to do certain tasks in a way that someone else does them in an excellent way, but thinking about how you can do it in an excellent way that can get a similar excellent result. So
Oh,
that's yeah, that's kind of I think why I kind of covering all my bases here in terms of strength in just one response, but I there's getting back to the original research question is what's what's right with people and not what's wrong with people.
I love that.
Yeah, that really helps us think about our life and our work in a way that's a positive lens, and not in a way that kind of tries to mend what we consider our weaknesses, but really identifying what we're good at, and that's our best way to have kind of exponential success in life.
And so in our culture of medicine, we focus on our weaknesses. So when I was in medical school and residency training, it was common for attendings and faculty to point out what I wasn't doing well, and
Mm-hmm.
not really focus on what I was really good at, but to focus on what I wasn't doing and to learn from that. And so I was constantly writing down what I wasn't doing. Can you talk a little bit about how, when you focus on the weakness aspect of training versus strength-based training, how can you talk a little bit about that differential?
Yeah, definitely. So we certainly don't want to ignore weaknesses or ignore kind of the shortcomings that we know that we have or that we can identify with. So ignoring them is not the solution, but being aware of them is, and then also being able to have a comfortable conversation with our manager or a direct report about what those might be and how we can mitigate them through the things that we're really good at. So one a simple way and simple but not realistic way of doing that is by eliminating all the things that you're bad at within your job and giving them to someone else. Um, that would be that would be ideal, but not always realistic, because we there's just things about what we do and our expectations at work that we just can't avoid. But when we can focus on and understand what we're really good at, then we can mitigate those blind spots or those weak areas and be able to thrive in those spots that we're really good at, that naturally we have these tendencies, and then we were upskilled and we have this knowledge in order to apply it in a way that's productive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it was a new approach and a new way of thinking about things for me when I hired my executive coach, Dr. Elsie Coe, a couple of years ago. And, she was like, let's focus on your strengths. Have you even done the Cliff Strength Finder test? I said, what? No, I've heard of Gallup, but I have never done that before. And she said, well, that's basic. So you got to start there. So, we did that, and then we started focusing on my strengths. And it really made a difference, Ryan, for me, because, I'm going to share my strengths. Number one is achiever. Number two is strategic. Number three is responsibility. Number four is individualization. And number five is positivity. So for all of you listening, if you take the test, you get a printout of your top 5 strengths and really your top 10. And then it goes into detail about your weaknesses as well. And when you know that, I realized that, integrity and honesty was high on my list too. And that I kept putting myself in environments that weren't in alignment with my strengths. And I kept putting myself in leadership position roles that did not allow me to have the creativity to be as strategic as I am. So it was underutilizing my talents. And that's why I was frustrated. And that contributed to burnout for me. So I just wanted to share that. And it's really been life altering for me, which is why I'm really passionate about this discussion today.
Nice. I love it. So thank you for sharing your top 5. That's beautiful. If you do the math, so there's 34 themes and we all have a top 5. So everyone gets one. There's a 1 in 33 million chance that you have the same top 5 as someone else.
Whoa, I had
Yeah.
no idea. 1 in 33 million?
Yeah. Yeah, currently there's been only 28 million people who have taken the Clifton Strengths Finder, so there's a pretty good chance that nobody else has discovered the same top 5 as you. Of course, we know there's several more billion people within the world, but the the really unique thing I think about that is there's this promise from Clifton Strengths that there's something in this world that you can do better than anyone else. So when we have that sense of hope, I think it's really easy for us to say, okay, yeah, let me learn, discover, and apply my strengths so I can bring to my sphere of influence something that nobody else can.
Wow. I mean, that's really powerful. 1 out of 33 million have the same top 5.
Yeah.
And Ryan, do our strengths change over time?
So
I asked
what,
that.
yeah, great question. So we get that a lot. And people do like to take, especially people like to take the Clifton Strengths Finder multiple times,
Because
especially
I was thinking about
especially yeah, for us who are like psychology junkies. Yeah, we're curious about that. What we've found is maybe after a life event, the order of our top 5 or top 10 can kind of change. But the beautiful thing about the assessment is that it draws on really some innate characteristics that we can't or just don't change throughout our lifetime. So you might find the order to be kind of different from time 1 to time 2, but yeah, the beautiful thing is it doesn't change a whole lot.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Because it was really interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the DISC personality assessment.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of leaders use that in healthcare too. And I first took that a couple of years ago before I started working with Dr. Ko as a baseline assessment. And then I took it again like maybe 6 months ago, and my categories had changed actually in my
Okay.
leadership style. But it makes sense because I was really learning a lot more about being more of a well-balanced leader in the training. And so, but now I understand that with the Gallup, it's more of your inner, talent and characteristics of your personality too as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for those who are really interested in assessments, which I'll raise my hand and claim to be part of that group, we have a lot of uh, we have just I'll say a thorough explanation of how Clifton Strengths differs from things like DISC to Myers-Briggs to VIA character strengths on our
Okay.
website. So feel free to check that out. We don't hide from the fact that there's other great assessments out there, and certainly those can be kind of used in tandem to further help kind of entrench and understand our strengths and how we can apply them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and for all of you, we'll include all this information in our posting and social media as well as on Ryan's bio page. So I have another question, Ryan. We talked earlier about how you work with well-being professionals to really create more engagement in the workplace. And mentioned there were 12 elements that you teach.
Yeah,
Can you review those for us?
you bet. So employee engagement, and I've got a list of the 12, and it might be boring if I just read them through. So maybe I can kind of explain them in a more illustrative way. But employee engagement, if anyone is unfamiliar with it, it's because when we say engagement, I think a lot of times we interpret it in our own way that we kind of think what engagement means. And sometimes engagement means participation, like did you engage in an initiative? But how we think about engagement is we think about it as an employee's kind of their psychological commitment and their enthusiasm for their work and for their workplace and for their organization and for their manager and their leadership. So that's kind of how we identify it. The 12 elements were kind of again developed through a large research study. This one was kind of led by Tom Rath, and I guess it was led by Jim Harder, pardon me, in the 1990s.
Okay.
And again, this was a study that was where the recipients, or I guess the participants in the research were asked several questions about kind of workplace scenarios and asked to rate them on a 1 to 5 scale. And they were asked hundreds of questions. and to rate the strength of how much they agreed or disagreed with each question. And they were asked again, to the participants were highly successful individuals within highly successful teams and organizations. And there's kind of foundational elements of engagement, and then there's more kind of top of pyramid uh, elements of engagement, if you will. So at the very foundational level, the first level of, or the first element of engagement is knowing what's expected of you at work. So right now, only about 50% of United States employees can give this a 5 out of 5, that I know what's expected of me at work.
Yes, expectations and roles are generally not really that clarified.
Yeah. So that I just find that fascinating still. We find that 1 out of 3 employees are what we consider engaged. And then there's about 1 out of 20 who are actively disengaged. And then the middle is the bigger group, and those are just not engaged. So so yeah, that's we have all this data as well, just on the Gallup website. So please feel free to check it out. And Katie, I can connect you with kind of the best links to identify some of these data points that I'm mentioning. But yeah, so knowing what's expected of me at work is the most foundational element. The next one is I have the materials and equipment that I need to do my work right. This is again about 50% who can give this a strong, that 5 out of 5. I strongly agree with this statement. We found that, interestingly, this, when we were kind of during the onset of the pandemic, we really took we evaluated engagement more frequently than we do kind of in a traditional year. And we found that this number really dropped early on in the pandemic. So when you think about when a lot of leaders and really individual contributors had to go home and kind of operate remotely or through Zoom when we weren't upskilled and properly trained on how to conduct our work through a remote environment, this number really dropped, and it's back up to 50% now, which is not aspirational, but it's where we're at.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of just that base of the pyramid, and again, these are things that can be found on our website as well. So I encourage you to check that out
Absolutely.
online.
If you can send me the link, I'll include that too in on the bio page and posting.
Okay. Yeah, wonderful. So next elements, I can kind of run through them a little more quickly here. At work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. So that kind of, if you look and decipher that question, it's all about strengths, natural tendencies to do what I do best. So we're kind of evaluating there. Are you able to use your strengths in a productive way? Next one is, in the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praised for doing good work. And then next, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. So this is a super interesting one where we found this is really kind of asking about well-being. Does somebody care about my well-being and who I am as a person, not just a productive employee? We've got great data on how this question has really waxed and waned throughout the onset of COVID and to where we are now. Next one is, this is cue number 6, so we're halfway through here. There's someone at work who encourages my development. And then we get to the kind of the top half of the pyramid. At work, my opinions seem to count. The mission or purpose of my organization makes me feel my job's important. My fellow employees are committed to doing quality work. Okay. Next one is Q10 here. I have a best friend at work. This is the one that that we'll say gets the most eyebrow raises when we talk about it. But this is one where, so again, just remember that this was a statistically significant 5 out of 5 for those in when we conducted the original research in the most successful roles within the most successful teams inside the most successful organizations. She sells seashells by the seashore.
That was a mouthful, Ryan.
Yeah, it was.
So first
Yeah.
of all, I'm laughing out loud, and physicians and nurses, please forgive me. Healthcare leaders, please forgive me, but I'm laughing because every one of them you've mentioned is absent in healthcare except for quality of work. We work with nurses and doctors every day on the front line that care about the quality of work. But when it comes to all the other stuff you mentioned on the pyramid, I was laughing. I'm like, I don't have that. I'm on the front line right now and I don't have any of that. And then the best friend was like, what?
Yeah.
That
So
would be ideal. But
yes.
there's so much change right now and everything, so much stress at work that we don't have time to talk and connect with people at work. We show up as doctors and we're just in it, and then we leave because we're exhausted. So I'm really glad you brought this up, because I think this is definitely foundational for us if we want to consider pivoting healthcare and how we show up every day.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you're just so transparent about it. And I think people are about this question because I think it's safe and we should be transparent. Like if you don't have a best friend at work, just own it and let's talk about it. And let's move back down the pyramid and to the foundations of engagement before we tackle this one that raises eyebrows. But all that being said, we have a ton of great data on those who can give this a 5 and how it correlates to some really important business outcomes, things like productivity, profitability, safety incidences. If you have a best friend at work, there's someone who you can comfortably talk to about things that are important to you that you maybe couldn't bring up to your boss or another co-employee. So you have this like person who you can, I don't know, maybe you can vent to, or you can just share that what's really important to you that's not safe to share with someone else. It can kind of feel like a touchy-feely type of question, but we actually find that even in our boots on the ground industrial workers who who are out there creating skyscrapers and fixing power lines, and can give this a 5 because their best friend is literally saving their lives through safety procedures, then it can kind of make sense and make light bulbs go off. But I'd say let's start at the base and work our way up. If you're just new to employee engagement and kind of getting started on it.
Well, thank you, Ryan. And my 2 cents on this is foundationally for healthcare, we need to understand our roles and expectations. They need to be realistic. And the second one is, if we have the equipment and resources available, that goes along with human factor ergonomics. And we're really looking at that in healthcare as well. And, right now, I think everyone is tapped out with their cognitive load, including even healthcare leaders today. So really going back to the basics and looking even at using human factor ergonomics as a model to revamp how we operate on a daily basis would make a huge difference.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, thank you for reviewing that. And it definitely, we talked a little bit how I wanted a little bit of a roadmap today of what a healthy work environment would look like and what can happen. And I'm really glad that you reviewed the pyramid for us. Can you give us an example of I'm curious how Gallup actually creates a well-being space for all of its employees?
Yeah. Okay. So that's great. Before I just don't want to be remiss. There are 2 other elements I didn't mention.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. And it's first one is someone has talked to me about my progress in the last 6 months, and then in the last year I've had opportunities to at work to learn and grow. So how do we create kind of organizational well-being at Gallup, and then how do we then kind of preach what we practice. It really, I think it, very simply put, we have a great wellness and well-being internal program that is full of a lot of traditional things that we know a lot of people need. Things like stress reduction initiatives, tobacco cessation. We've got on-site fitness center. We've got exercise reimbursement. A lot of those perks and programs and policies that we know kind of the modern day workforce, we'll say, kind of has come to expect or has come to learn that is supportive for their physical health and mental health and well-being. But there's this other, before we over rely on policies and perks and programs, we make sure that there is a manager who really truly cares about people and is highly trained, as well as a competent, kind of, I guess, innately competent at leading people. So really kind of comes down to, it's the manager, which is the name of another Gallup book. This was kind of I think it might have been about 2018 or 19. Again, Jim Harder as well as Jim Clifton, which is really kind of comes down to in order for organizational well-being to really flourish, we need the direct manager to actually care and to support the well-being of direct reports. Otherwise, the policies, perks, and programs can just kind of live out there and be uninhabited and unutilized and not engaged with, as a lot of wellness professionals like to say. So manager training, upskilling is a big part of that. Selection of managers is also important. We find that 1 out of 10 people are a good natural fit to be a leader of other people. 2 out of 10, an additional 2 out of 10 have maybe enough natural tendency to be a good manager, but they need extra training and upskilling. So really about 3 out of 10 people are a good natural fit or can be upskilled to be an effective manager. That's a pretty small percentage, we'll say. But what's broken in a lot of workplaces and institutions and healthcare systems is that in order to grow within the organization, kind of the only way to do that, or one of the only ways to do that, is to become a manager. Mm-hmm. So if I'm a great salesperson, the only way I can really improve, if I've kind of maxed out all that I can sell, is to become the sales manager. And that's a tough task. And just hang with me here, because I jumped from medical to sales, but that's a tough task to ask a thriving salesperson to do, because those kind of competencies are a lot different to be able to sell versus to be able to manage.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. And it's very similar for physicians. I mean, a lot of times we're asked to come into a leadership role and there is no training. It's just, oh, today you're a medical director, and you're like, okay, what do I do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm glad that you brought this up, where it's really interesting that 1 out of 10 can be a great manager, and 2 innately, right? And then 2 out of 10 people also can be a good manager, but they need a little bit of additional training and upscaling. Mm-hmm. So 3 out of 10 people in general have the ability to manage, versus 7 out of 10 are better off in their role, mm-hmm. not being in a position.
Yeah. So if you find yourself in that leading people role, and it's the hardest part of your job, that's common. It's okay. It's important to know that, and to kind of identify other leaders who are really just blessed with the ability to do that, and they can potentially become what the label middle manager is not a good one, but can become more of a direct report, and then kind of report up to an executive.
Mhm.
And I'm not here to give advice on organizational structure, but that's just a small piece to be thinking about. I think it is so important, though, when we think about how to help um, organizations and people within organizations thrive in their well-being. It does come down to structure and environment, and not just those, say it again, policies, perks, and programs.
Yep, absolutely. Um, well, so everyone, I guess I have one more question, Ryan. So how can people get in touch with you, or if there's healthcare systems listening to and they would like to do maybe strength finder testing for their leadership
Hmm.
team, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or Gallup?
Yeah, that's great. You can feel free to reach out to me. You can, provide my email address, Katie. You can find me on LinkedIn. Love to participate in LinkedIn and kind of stay in tune there. So feel free to reach out either of those ways.
Okay, great. And if there are physicians, nurses listening that want to do the Gallup Strength Finder test, what's the best
Hmm.
way for them to access that and to get some coaching on their strengths?
Right, that's great. So I can provide that link for you. You can Google Clifton Strengths Finder, take the assessment, takes about 20 minutes. I always like to say, take it as if your life depends on it, because it really does. And just give it your full attention, and it can do, it manifests in some really powerful to-dos and ways that you can kind of think about how you are operating within work and life differently.
I love that. And for everyone listening to, this is a new book that came out from Gallup, Wellbeing at Work, and I will post a link on this. And Ryan had a hand. He was one of the contributors for the novel. So I wanted to make sure I did a shout out for this amazing book. It goes into detail on change management and what's required, to create a well-being environment. And there's a lot of data and measurements and statistics as well in this book. So there's a lot of evidence and decades of research that goes into what we've talked about today. Well, Ryan, I just want to thank you so much for being here today. And is there anything else that you wanted to add before we close up?
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate it. I think what you're doing is so important. We know that there's just incredibly challenging work environments within the healthcare space. So I just want to honor that and recognize the really good, the really significant and essential work that people are doing and kind of overseeing. So I just want to, I think I could just close by just recognizing just how important that is, and we recognize that as well. And we have, we have a lot of professionals who work directly with those who are in the healthcare space, and the research that we've done on it is unique and super interesting. So feel free to check out those articles as well.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in and listening. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us. Ryan, again, will have his own bio page on my website with all the links as well. We hope that you have a happy new year. And I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Thank you, everyone.